injured by an officer, whether courtesy, enforce, whatever, a ticket that he shouldn't have got, we would bring the parties together and like hash it out. But that didn't change the behavior.
It doesn't.
You know, so now it was like, no, we're going to do formal complaints because you won't change your procedures. You won't hold your own officers accountable so that it's transparent to us that they're being held accountable. So that's kind of where it comes from. But what I do is not just hold them accountable for like the things they do wrong. We've gone to scenes and like officers have been like officers. You know what I'm saying? They've been doing what they do. They treat you like a human being. And we watch it, we see it, we observe it, we talk to the neighbors that may have been out there before we got there, and they say, nah, you know, he's been standing, they didn't curve him, or he walked out, they didn't drag him, you know. Some of the other officers came, they told him to leave, they didn't need 6 officers, you know, so that kind of stuff, we give commendations to those officers. That's what we want. And then they released them, you know what I'm saying? So it was like after they figured out everything that was going on, there was like, oh, you know, you can go on your way. And they de-escalated the situation. Right. So, and that's the things that we want. So when I see that happening, I give those officers commendations because I want them to continue to use de-escalation tactics. Because it's the clown officers that I want up out of here, like Dagmar.
Or all about the home PD.
Mic check, mic check. It's about that time.
And then with El Cajon PD, they gave El Cajon PD accommodations for how they ticketed the people who were feeding the homeless earlier this year.
Right.
So I always think that type of stuff, like, you know, motivates them to continue to do it.
Of course. It's chain of command, man. They just follow what told these brats, they'll be brats.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll be what
Full pay.
Oh yeah, that's on both sides.
Suspended with pay.
Yeah.
Otherwise known as vacation.
Okay, so my quorum is live, YouTube is live, we're gonna go live on KBOK in moments.
Oh yes, we should turn on my mic.
Yes.
So that I can be heard.
Yes.
Right here is going to be a segment to briefly introduce yourself for this amount of time. Briefly. It's basically who you are, what you do, and thank you for being here, so on and so forth. Huh?
I only need 5 minutes, but yeah. What's the name? It's called, how do you pronounce the
Maya.
Yeah.
I'm gonna plug the Black America video we did earlier tonight.
You should.
Because
and I want to get some. I want to continue to advertise it as we go.
Yeah, because there was a. Yeah, there was a few. I was starting with this one. I kind of went into it, and I realized I was going back into the Black America stuff. I was like, okay, let me just cut that out, and I'll just tell them to go check that out. But then I could fast forward. So. Yeah, we got to plug that video. It had a lot of views like the first week, and then
I boosted. That's because I boosted it for the first 2 weeks for $20, and that like really makes a change, especially if you do it.
Before I forwarded it to Felipe, so hopefully he'll be able to cover
You get some money behind it, it gets a lot of views. So I mean, $20 a week for about 2-3 weeks.
We gotta call Soros, man.
I'm working on it, but it's something y'all gotta work on together. I wanna go talk to
He's back in Genevieve, Soros. Gave her money. Like,
there's hope. There's hope.
Yeah, there's hope.
Doesn't have to go to our tax. It doesn't be taken out of our tax dollars.
What are you guys trying to do?
Oh no, just advertising. We have time on there to be able to advertise, get some extra funds allocated to be able to advertise for videos that we made and the actual show itself, so on and so forth. So, pregame. Hey, you want to turn your mic on?
It's on.
Oh,
It's on.
you want to rock it like that?
I don't want it to get.
You don't
I
have to
don't
see
want it to get in the way. If I do this, you can see it.
Oh,
So-
okay, I got you.
Let's see what's up
You
here.
rock that mic in a unique fashion.
This
Take it
is
back to the
awkward.
days of yes, yes, you all love me.
All right, so at least it's not in the way.
We
'Cause
still got time. How much time we got?
About a minute.
I bet that-
Good.
2 minutes?
Less than that. You got about 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Ooh, all right, 30 seconds. Thank you, 30.
That's one time.
Okay, here we go.
Do I get to hear the theme music?
Yes.
All right, bring it. That's my bread and butter. Meat and potatoes.
Mhm.
Go.
Welcome to the Mayat Quorum. My name is Apollo Olongo, brother of Alfred Olongo that was gunned down in 2016. This is our show, the Mayat Quorum, episode 5, Law Enforcement Militarization. I am, for one, very excited about today's show. We have a very, very special guest with us. Is doing a lot of work in our community here in San Diego, and her voice should be heard and streamed and understood and dissected. Mrs. Tasha Williamson. Tasha is a community civil rights activist, special needs activist with community-oriented police experting skills here in San Diego County, and has been representing us, below the radar. A lot of individuals that apply their lives like this don't get the opportunity that they need to be able to get out the word and advertise the work that they do on a daily basis. And I'm, for one, very thankful that she's here with us today and gets the opportunity to do that. And she will enlighten you in a way that you've only expected. Mrs. Williamson?
Thank you. Thank you, you guys, for allowing me to come on. I've been here since 2000 on and off in San Diego, primarily dedicated to what in law enforcement is called the Big Three, City Heights, Southeast San Diego, and then Central, which covers neighborhoods like Shelltown and downtown San Diego. And so I really appreciate being here. One of the highlights for me is the militarization, is that we really look at how that came about and how the changes happened. Since 2000, I've been working with law enforcement, responding to scenes for violent injuries and homicides, alongside law enforcement and other community members and clergy. We call that CAS, Community Assistance Support Team, and San Diego Compassion Project. San Diego Compassion Project has been in existence since 2008, and CAS has been in existence for about 5 years now. They respond to violent injuries and do walk and knocks in the neighborhoods with law enforcement, problem-solving meetings. We have, like I said, I facilitate a community engagement bus tour for new graduate officers, probation, as well as SDPD, and then also provide trainings and support.
Definitely, you've been doing a lot of work in this community, and I'm very thankful for that. Art?
Hi, how you guys doing? Well, my name's Art Fusco. Well, happy Cinco de Mayo, everybody.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's Cinco de Mayo today. So I wanted to say, we are about police reform. We're the balance to those who think that law enforcement and the criminal justice system don't need reform. we've seen and experienced all sorts of abuses of power and bias with the police. And we know what it's like to be written off and dismissed when we bring those issues up. And we know a lot of you have felt that way too. So please join us. Call in, email us, Facebook, YouTube, whatever. We want to hear from you.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Art, and our one and only Wildcat, the statistician that holds it down. What's going on?
Hey, what's up? Well, I'm cop watcher in City Heights with United Against Police Terror San Diego. So we do not work with law enforcement in any capacity for many reasons, for boundaries. We're very fortunate to have Tasha on the show to give that perspective. Our perspective is basically, and I would like to quote Warren versus District of Columbia in 1981, a government and its agents are under no general duty to provide public services such as police protection to any particular individual citizen. Again, that was Warren versus District of Columbia in 1981. We have no faith in the system, so we are boots on the ground, de-escalating and preventing what police do versus just reacting or reacting with protest after what they do. It's very important that the community members that have a position of privilege get responsive and be proactive in expressing solidarity for communities that they serve. And that's pretty much what our cop watchers do. And I just, grateful to be here. I believe that unfortunately, countywide by every branch of law enforcement, we are up to 855 people killed from the 1950s. So hopefully we're digging more and more. Hopefully, we can go even further into history and how did this systemic issue come about in San Diego, and addressing the militarization of San Diego, I think is very important because it's a military town.
Definitely it is. I mean, the naval base is right here, and I actually do some work in Coronado on a weekly basis, and the presence of it is here. The culture of it is here, and I'm very thankful for what you do, Kat. A lot of people tend to write it off as because it does not really involve working with police in a way that they feel is positive, that it's not the way. But I believe in the yin-yang theory, and you have to have a yin to the yang. As long as it works together, it makes a balance. And that's why, since I met you and you explained to me what you do, I've always been behind you in what you do. And
thank you.
I do try to soften you up a little bit, be a little more inviting of working together, but you make your stand, and you make your stand clear, and I definitely respect that.
There's gotta be somebody to do it.
Definitely. You have to listen to the person that tells you that, and at the same time listen to the other side. So if you keep a strong stand on one side and the other side keeps a strong stand, but decide to somehow find a middle ground, that's the way forward. You take the best of both worlds and move forward in that way.
Especially because Trump is in office, and it goes down to the objective. What is the mission? What do we all want? How do we all get there? It may be through different paths, but this is actually an act of true collaboration. This is a test for all of us.
Definitely, it is. So it is.
Definitely, I agree.
I agree
Tasha?
as well. I agree as well. I just started, like Kat has been, I've been watching her videos, and we're very different spectrums of how we deal with police. Although I do protest them, I'm very peaceful. It's a peaceful protest. I'm not, I'm being deemed anti-police now that I started protesting them, and Kat reassures me that I'm not.
You're not. Exactly. That you are not.
We do basically. We're testing.
They want to know what anti-police is. Tell them, let me know. And I start laughing.
Well, what's legal? What's legal? We're working within what's legal. We're trying to clap back against the respectability politics part of it, and understanding that if somebody is enraged, to validate that rage and validate that their voice, because as Martin Luther King, we talked about whitewashing last week, and Martin Luther King talked about it's the voices of the oppressed.
Yes,
exactly.
That they try to water down.
Yeah, and we definitely can allow that. Today's segment is. This is the program summary for today. Basically, we started off with our introduction. Following this program summary will be the historical anchor coming from the one and only Art Fusco. We'll then go to a commercial break, and returning will be our panel discussion, where we will engage with Tasha Williamson in a panel discussion that will go deeper into law enforcement militarization, not only here locally in San Diego or Southern California or just the state of California, but nationally. We'll take a look at it from a higher spectrum. Me, for one, I would like to touch on how this actually came about. So I'm going to not really start it all the way back from the 50s and prior, or the 1919s. It's going to start kind of around the Nixon era when the war of drugs came into place, and a lot of green lighting for militarization of institutions like police, which were originally meant just to be supervisors, equipping them with the military grade equipment that they need to start performing tasks that were originally allocated to the National Guard or the Coast Guard and other military style forms of governing. So I am, for one, very excited for that. I would like to hand it over now to my good friend Art Fusco for what we like to call the historical anchor. This is where he will go over a historical point that is relevant to what we are discussing and tie it all into how we will discuss it after the commercial break in our panel discussion. Art, please take us on.
Thanks a lot, Apollo. And so today's historical anchor is basically law enforcement militarization. And I'm starting in 1877. So when Reconstruction ended in 1877 with Republican Rutherford B Hayes taking the presidency as part of a great compromise, Democrats wanted something in return. So the Posse Comitatus Act was signed in 1878, which prevented the federal government from using the military to enforce domestic laws within the states.
Can you repeat that again? Hold on.
So what it's about is it's a law that prevents the federal government from using the military to enforce domestic laws within the states, because they were doing that in the southern states after the Civil War. Okay. And that's how, that was their idea of Reconstruction, bring in the troops and make them change. But there was a compromise. The Southern Democrats were tired of the federal troops occupying their states since the Civil War. And so this act would leave the South to their own affairs once again. Okay. And it was around this time when the black codes and the vagrancy laws began taking place in the South. Okay. And if anyone would like to know more information about the Jim Crow era or of the Civil Rights era, Apollo and I actually produced a video earlier this year called Black America. And it's on YouTube. You can go onto the Alfredo Longo Foundation YouTube page, or my personal YouTube page, Art Fusco. So you can go to that. But let's go ahead and fast forward to the 40s and 50s. Training videos from the 1940s and 50s suggest that police were trained to engage the public much differently than they do today. Specifically, they were non-militaristic. They were much easier to approach. Not so scary looking.
Kind of like on the Andy Griffith Show.
A little bit, yeah. Those were the days when there was traffic cops and vice squads. So during the time they were equipped with 6-shooters or 9mm or baton, handcuffs, vest and a shotgun, maybe some nunchucks. Maybe. Yeah, and that began to change in the 60s. In April of 1965, the Hub Jewelry and Loan Company that was in downtown San Diego was robbed at gunpoint. The gunmen killed the store owner and then camped out in the building, shooting it out with police who were outgunned. And the standoff lasted for 4 hours and ended when a Navy sailor arrived with a flashbang grenade. Okay. Right? He came from the base with a flashbang grenade, and with police permission, he detonated it in the store. Afterwards, an officer came in with a shotgun and shot the gunman. Okay. That happened the same year as the Watts riots. So after the Watts riots specifically happened, an LAPD officer named John Nelson, who had been part of a special task force in the Vietnam War, suggested that they create a unit similar to the task force that he'd been a part of. Okay. And it was originally supposed to be named the Special Weapons and Attack Team. But that didn't sound very friendly, so they replaced "and attack team" with "and tactics," giving birth to Special Weapons and Tactics.
That's the SWAT team.
Yeah. So this was clearly a case of officers coming up with a solution that only made things worse, however.
So the idea of SWAT was basically developed in the state of California?
It was LAPD.
LAPD?
Yep.
They're the originators of the SWAT team.
LAPD are the originators. And
Wonder they're
after
so
that,
proud.
it spread like a wildfire.
Mm-hmm.
So none of this helped when Nixon became president and
Oh,
started
Lord
the war on drugs in the 70s. And then Ronald Reagan in the 80s signed the Military Cooperation and Civilian Enforcement Agencies Act in 1981, which allowed them and police and the military to exchange information, tactics, and supplies. So the DoD also had a program that transferred old and new military equipment to police as well. That's where you get like the tanks and a lot of the other equipment.
Armored mobile vehicles.
Yeah.
Basically.
So that's basically the that's basically,
Bearcats.
yeah, and that's basically it. That's the anchor.
Ooh.
What happened and then in 1997 there was another shootout in Hollywood
Mhm.
where the officers were outgunned.
Definitely remember that
The
one.
Hollywood shootout.
Yeah.
And that was another catalyst for people to adopt SWAT teams and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Until we're here.
They robbed a bank right in Hollywood.
Yeah,
And
they
they're the
robbed
ones
the
that
bank.
had all of the
They had all of this. They had all
Kevlar
this.
vests, head to toe, basically.
They had all this armor-piercing bullets. They injured 18 people,
Wow.
and the only ones that were killed were the gunmen themselves.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely remember that for one. I watched that live actually in 1997.
Yeah, I didn't know anything
Oh,
about it
snap.
until I started researching
Do
everything.
you remember all that?
North Hollywood.
Huh?
Yeah, you talking about North Hollywood?
Yeah, the shootout. in
I
North
was in it.
Hollywood.
I'm a South Central.
Oh my goodness! Welcome South
Born and
Central.
raised.
I lived in Inglewood for about
Yeah.
4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Not too long ago, so I got a lot of love for that.
Yeah, no, I was there, and it was horrific. I mean, I remember just from the black community perspective, we were just praying they weren't black,
Right.
because it was going to be an all-out war.
Mhm.
We had already dealt with, alongside Latinos, the Rampart Division, and all of their corruption that was sanctioned until there was a whistleblowing, and that came out because officers from Los Angeles at that time looked just like criminals, and so they were doing a lot of things that were criminal, and they were getting away with it. There was a lot of homicides and deaths and injuries to citizens by officers, confiscation of things that belonged to people, their property they never received back because they were stolen. And so those things were clear. When the North Hollywood incident happened,
Right.
I remember, watching on the news, because everything was live, that the officers actually had to go to a gun store.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
in order
they
to-
actually confiscated a lot of weapons because they were outgunned. They needed
Yeah.
they needed the
Yeah,
weapons.
they did. The owner actually gave it to him, knowing
Yeah.
that it was more of like a promise they would pay.
Mhm.
And
I hope they did that.
yeah, I hope they did as well.
They probably
Because
returned them.
they may have returned them, but I'm sure that he had a hefty bill, and but they were outgunned,
Yeah.
and it was a very horrific scene, and citizens definitely were injured as well, and so this is something from my perspective where we definitely need someone who's going to be able to fight people like that,
Mhm.
Right.
because this was just out in the open. They were shooting at everything.
Yeah.
The helicopter, they were shooting at people, women, children, there was no regard for life.
Definitely. So
Yeah,
we,
they were there to fight. Yeah.
Yeah.
They were
yeah,
there
we
to
do
fight.
have an understanding that when things do get pushed to that limit, even the human
There-
beings
there
that
are limits,
might
yeah.
have certain views towards police can come to an understanding and say yes, they
Save
might
us.
need that. But yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But
There is
where are the
limit.
limits that do we stop
Exactly.
that at?
That we have
What
to
is
have
too
limits.
far?
Yeah, we have to have limits.
Mhm.
What is too far?
And
And
that's what we're here to talk
should
about.
we allow them to apply it to any random situation? Should you treat a situation in a neighborhood where peaceful people are protesting the same way as the North Hollywood shootout?
And
know,
I agree with you that we
and-
should not. There should be a process and
Definitely.
a protocol for that.
Definitely. Well, we'll talk about that once we return back from the break. Thank you very much for listening.
was going by that clock.
Well, commercial?
Yeah.
We're
Mic's
still-
off?
I'm like, the mic's on.
It's off.
All right. I learned the hard way last time. So
Because you was still talking.
yeah. I learned the hard way, so I just realized once I sign up, just be quiet. Y'all should be quiet. That's a good historical
Yes,
anchor.
it's hot.
I like that. The energy was definitely awesome.
You know, I've been here with Pavement Break Features before.
Yeah.
I was going by that clock. And I just
Oh,
threw it off.
what did I want to ask you?
It's good to
Jay,
go.
Jay Bowser, I guess he's District 9 on the
Now, once I realized you were going off of that, that's
Community
when I
Advisory
realized.
Board? Is
I
he
did.
District 9?
I'm assuming.
I never
I
saw
don't
it.
know. I don't really know how that works.
I don't know how that works either.
You're talking about with CAB, Community Advisory Board?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
And then there's one for like, I don't know. I have to look at the list.
I don't
again.
know
was like, who is
I don't
this
know
guy?
what districts those they serve. The members
Yeah, yeah.
serve. So
I
I
thought
thought
they-
they were for, but I don't know.
Ah.
Because remember they came
Or
on.
maybe it's-
My issue with the whole CAB thing
Mhm.
is that Myrtle did it so that they would stop
to take the heat off
protest.
of her.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Once that heat came off of her, because they haven't advanced to any advice that I know of
I
about police accountability
I haven't heard anything.
or
about
police
it.
procedures.
Yeah.
And I think that's an issue for some of the members.
You ready?
All right, what's the time countdown?
Right now.
Welcome back. We are the Maya Quorum. This is episode 5, Law Enforcement Militarization. We have a special guest with us here today that has been active in the San Diego community and Southern California communities of Los Angeles. Tasha Williamson will be here with us, a community civil rights activist, special needs activist, community-oriented police expert, and has been, like I said, in this community in San Diego. I'm going to love engaging with her today in this discussion. This is the segment where we basically sit down and give perceptions from all different sides of light to be able to have one consolidated understanding of the particular subject and topic. I'm not trying to be all right wing, all left wing. We're trying to bring the bird with the claws and the beak and the eyes. So to be able to do that, we have to open our eyes to the absolute opposites. And then sit down in the middle and work our way forward. So today, militarization of police. I like to start by defining that. You know, as it's defined, militarization of police refers to the use of military equipment and tactics by law enforcement officers. This includes the use of armored personnel carriers, assault rifles, machine guns, flashbang grenades, grenade launchers, sniper rifles, and the Special Weapons and Tactics team, which is the SWAT team that Art briefed us on, was established in our Southern California's Los Angeles County. Where did this all begin from? Where did it start from? Art took you a little bit further back. A little bit further back. I'm going to start around the area of Nixon's time. So 14 years following Nixon's War on Drugs Act of '74, the transfer of extra weapons and gear from the military to local police began via the 1033 program, which was created by Congress in 1989 as a part of the National Defense Authorization Act under the George Herbert Bush administration. That was the beginning of this particular practice that is happening now, that we are discussing now as a conflicting subject amongst our communities. The growth. How did it grow to become what it is today? Like Art touched on briefly, I would like to touch on the Clinton years. A program that was originally intended to help with drug enforcement, quote unquote, war on drugs, was expanded to cover counterterrorism in 1996. According to NPR, which is the National Public Radio, since the 1990s, the program has resulted in the transfer of more than $5.4 billion worth of military gear. Now, that's an astounding number. $5.4 billion worth of military gear in the hands of policing agencies that were established to be the peaceful energy and work with the communities. Now, as Tasha touched on earlier, being an experiencer of the North Hollywood shootout and realizing the needs of these particular specialized units and ideals in policing, I think that the discussion comes in clearly, where are the boundaries drawn? When Ferguson, Missouri, peaceful protesters came out and were antagonized by this militarized presence and turned it into something that it was never intended to be. It was not de-escalated, it escalated the situation.
Yep.
There are a lot of activists that are responsible for these gatherings, these rallies that stress for peaceful demonstrations. I have been in a ton of them since 2016 after my brother was shot. And I know and understand that there are emotions that are flaring high. And the last thing you want to see is the face and the representation of that which you feel deep down inside is oppressing you. It allows you the opportunity to be able to vex out that feeling that lies within you deep inside. And I think that is where this discussion sits into place. And where was the control in this entire thing? The control comes in the Obama administration. I've searched, there have not been a lot of counters, but in the Obama administration, when Obama announced he was banning the transfer of certain military equipment to police in 2015, he did not ban the entire act, but he strategically wanted to counter it, because banning the entire act with 1 year left in office would definitely be a lot harder than getting the Obamacare through Congress. So he did what he could. And, quote, President Barack Obama, he said, "We have seen how militarized gear can sometimes give people a feeling like there's an occupying force, as opposed to a force that's part of the community, that's protecting them and serving them. It can alienate and intimidate local residents and send the wrong message." And I agree with that. I definitely do, from the perspective that I'm standing in. And to answer that to the president, who is now former President Barack Obama, my personal belief, it is in my belief that police in America are here to serve those who own property in our communities and protect their properties that we live in and surround us. That's why the act of militarizing police is accepted and championed by the small percentage of Americans that support it. It gives some of them reassurance and a peace of mind that they are willing and capable to go that extra mile for them and protect that which they have acquired in their life. Now, that is truthfully how I feel from my perspective. And I'm hoping that in this panel discussion, we'll be able to engage other panel members today to be able to offer theirs. You know, a Huffington Post U-Government poll from August 2014 found that only 28% support giving military-grade weapons and vehicles to police, while 51% felt like use of such equipment was going too far, which I definitely agree with to an extent, because it's a discussion, Tasha, it's a discussion that is really, really fickle, you know? I would like to get your perspective on this from top to bottom and help enlighten not only me or the panel, but our listeners today on this topic.
Yeah, definitely. I want to take us back a little bit further, though, because when we look at that militarization, we talk about war on drugs. We can't do any of this without talking about racism. And in dealing with racism, we have to understand that when we look today at the opiate situation, there is no war on opiate drugs. There is, we want to give services and supports and things like that, right? But the war on drugs, we wanted to kill, suppress, sentence, imprison for lifetimes people who were either addicted or were drug dealers. And so when we talk about the war on drugs, we have to look at who was the war against.
I have a question, Tasha. Is the war on drugs technically over?
I don't believe that I think that there are some laws that are being passed that try to restore, so to speak. I mean, you can't restore someone's life that you've taken or that you've incarcerated for 20 or 15 or 20 years or life, because some people were third strike, right? And so they got 25 to life for, you know, a felony possession, you know, of a certain amount of drugs. And so, you know, those things, I think they're trying to now go back and say we got some things wrong, but you can never really, I mean, we can never really reconcile with the generational damage that was done with the war on drugs that affected communities that were mostly impoverished, that looked like you and me and the people on this panel, Black, brown, Pan-Asian, poor whites, were included in that. And so when we look at that, we have to deal with the economic, social economics of where the status of people were, and then also, you know, what color, what communities did these war on drugs happen, because I really don't see the tanks in suburbia. I see the tanks and the military equipment used mostly in urban, what they call urban neighborhoods, communities that we grew up in and that we're from and that we have loved ones in and that we went to school in. And so we need to really talk about that elephant in the room, which is racism. We militarized in communities that were already marginalized and disenfranchised. And I think that yes, I want officers to be safe. I want us to be safe from incidents that are needed, where we need military equipment, where harm to innocent life is going to be in jeopardy. But I don't think that we need to roll up deep like we do for domestic violence situations and things like that. I mean, again, SWAT is needed for that, and I have to say that in certain situations, SWAT is no longer, people used to think, and I know definitely in South Central, I could say in Southeast, when SWAT arrived, somebody was dying. You know, you were never gonna make it out alive if you had to have SWAT come to your situation, because SWAT was kind of like, we coming to just end it. We're coming to neutralize and end the problem. And that is how people in our communities like, that's how we viewed SWAT. You know, they gonna kill them. And now we have situations where SWAT is not killing folks. And so those things we need to understand, because it used to just be straight a headshot and that's it. Now they have, you know, they do the de-escalation tactics with having someone, an trained officer, to negotiate, a negotiator, to try and get the person out. And did they have that before? I think they did, but I think they were quick to kill us. And that is how it was perceived in our communities, with dealing with SWAT and local law enforcement. Now, when we talk about the 1033 program, $5.4 billion worth of equipment went to local agencies. And those looked like, we call them Humvees, mine resistant ambush protected, vehicles called MRAPs. You know, when we look at San Diego, just getting some information, the San Diego Police Department received 77 M16s, assault rifles and armored trucks. San Diego County Sheriff's Department received 10 M14 battle rifles. The San Diego Harbor Police received 1 infrared illuminator. The El Cajon Police Department received 10 M16 assault rifles. The Escondido Police Department received 25 M16 assault rifles, 4 M14 battle rifles, and armored truck, among other equipment. The National City Police Department received 17 M14 battle rifles. And so when I look at, the occupying force, when I hear that from the community, I understand, because you look like military. When I was there in El Cajon when the people, and I don't call them protesters. You guys were upset about conditions that were happening and have been happening for generations. You were not protesters. You were citizens that when you get tired and there is nothing else, you stand up.
And they
That
do-
is not fighting
and it's
back.
just
That's
using your
used
voice,
to-
and that
And
a lot
yeah,
of the
yeah.
protesters. I apologize. I just
No,
said
that's
it
okay.
speaks
Go
to me.
ahead.
It speaks to me a lot.
She was cussing and whatever. I just don't want you to touch them because I don't want them to touch you. And so I stood in between with alongside a line and row of other community members, not saying we don't want you all to protest, but saying we want you to have a voice, but we don't want you to be harmed
Well,
by.
as brother of Alfred Olongo, I would like to thank you guys for being that buffer and allowing that peaceful demonstration to happen. So thank you very much for that. I'm still very, very interested in finding out why that particular militarized aspect was absent in North Carolina, where they used that image to get these weapons to come to them from Congress.
So that you have
But
to
when
understand
that
that
image
was white
presents
people
itself-
that were, and there's a very difference. So we still need to deal with racism, because when white people protest, it's not a protest, right? When
Exactly.
white people burn down stuff, and it wasn't they're not rioters.
Nope.
You know, they're not looked
You
at
go
the
to-
same.
You go to
You know,
football
so-
games. Football games popping off in like Boston.
Yeah.
They do some damage,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you
Yeah,
never
it's not the
see
same.
that.
This is militarization also has a racist component to it because it is only used in communities that are marginalized and disenfranchised, and it is not used against white people and their children who will do the same, have the same tactics and the same type of events to get out their frustration and anger, or just do whatever they want to do.
Right.
And they're not called thugs, they're not called rioters, they're not called protesters. Oh, they just got out of hand.
Patriots. So with that question, I like to reach to Art. I still have that question. Art, what is your perspective on why these special grade weapons and presence that is promoted by even the Fraternal Order of Police as necessary for these particular situations, why was that presence not there in North Carolina if that is what they continue to claim is the reason why they're getting this weapon?
Because the police in North Carolina were not afraid of those protesters. That's why.
Why?
Because they weren't a threat to them. They were a threat to the minority.
Why were they not a threat?
Ooh,
Bring it.
I gotta bring it. We talked about it. The origins of law enforcement were slave patrols. We can't deny that this still echoes today. No matter how much we say, well, they still have to be a part of our society. We're not going to see them go away in our lifetime. Whatever. We're going against the grain and saying this is the root cause. It's radical thinking, actually, historic views, and I appreciate that, Arthur. It's because you're going to the root cause of how they became.
Right. That was their.
How they
that's
came
how they
to.
were born.
That's how they were born.
They were born in a racist.
And as
in a racist society.
And as I quote that, for a judge to agree that it's not meant for protecting citizens in the 1981 court ruling, we also got their interest is to just maintain order and reinforce laws. When you think about all the laws that the houseless, the disenfranchised, people that are losing their homes, their job is to maintain that order. So if there's disorder in any sense, which usually because of systemic issues, because of the racism that Tasha talked about, because that is still in place, that's why we see, protests, we see police protecting the white supremacists, basically saying they want to see a border wall, versus the naturalized citizens that were there to protest it that day that I went down there.
There was an incident the day before they started militarizing, where there was a white kid with a Trump hat, a "Make America Great Again" hat, and he had gone there to cause trouble. There's already lots of evidence that he'd gone there to cause trouble, and so I guess he didn't realize that he was going to piss off the entire crowd. And so he started running, and as he's running, he's got his video, and it looks like he's getting mauled by a bear like this, but if you see him from the outside, he's running around and then he trips. But it made national news, and I think it was the day after. It was
what
like the
was
day
he
after.
running from?
He was running from the protesters who were yelling at him. They started yelling at him because he had the hat on.
But also, you need to understand that when we had Black and Latino folks that were going in when Trump was campaigning,
Mhm.
and how they were brutalized and punched and hit, and
Oh, yeah.
and that also
I
made
wanted
national
to-
news.
I was going to bring
but
that
it
up, how
didn't.
And
STG
Trump
cleared
encouraged
downtown
that.
day.
It didn't, but it again,
It's a whole other-
we got to deal with the racism. We got to
Absolutely.
deal with the
Oh
racism.
my goodness.
And what's
And I
happening
think
is
they
that
got-
it's being
I think they
diluted.
got hooked. I think they got hooked into getting mad at this guy. And so when they got mad at this guy, it gave El Cajon a reason to militarize and to call all the other stations to come and help them.
Well, El Cajon did not have enough personnel for them that they thought to handle the situation.
Right.
And so I remember the day your brother was killed and the yellow tape was up, and on the other side of the building was rows and rows of police officers in that alley, and nobody saw it. And I remember saying to the captain, can you please not bring them forward? It's going to upset the crowd. Like, if they see more police, it's going to look different to them. And I remember him holding back. And I'm saying, like, can you just get your officers out of here? Like, they're upset. They need a place and a space to be able to vent. Me, Bishop Bowser, other pastors were talking to law enforcement saying, your presence is the frustration and the anger because someone just lost their life and they're tired. And so bringing more officers is not going to de-escalate the situation. You need to get your officers up out of here as quickly as you can so that they have a space among themselves to be able to talk, to be able to de-escalate themselves. These are people. They are human beings, and we know how to control ourselves. We know how to help each other. When we have people that get out of control, we know how to let people vent. And like Kat said, our words cannot be threatening when we have nothing on us that can cause harm or injury.
Yes.
You know, we know how to help our own people. So, and I'm not saying we don't need the police at all. I'm just saying that at some point you got to let us be able to find out who your friend is so we can bring that person close to you, and those types of things, because we don't necessarily need them to bring more. That a lot of that was causing more tension.
Like I said, I think it's political. I think it's to be able to show the presence of being able to protect the property of those who own property there is the image that they want to project, because that's how they get reelected for positions. That's how they advance to different political offices, by showing that presence in its toughest form, by saying that this is what we stand with and we're willing to do whatever it takes for you to protect your stuff. Instead of thinking about these are the people that we need to be protecting, it's on a higher level of understanding, a higher level of hierarchy in civilization.
And
They're there to show
yeah.
to the wealthy 1%ers here that we're here for you. These people are the problem. We just gunned one down, but we're going to keep these folks in line for you. Make sure they don't do A, B, C, or D that could happen. That's the mentality that they go into. So when we look at it as we're just the people trying to voice ourselves, it's irrelevant to what they're thinking. It's contradictory to what they're thinking. You are the element of crime. You are not the element of a peaceful protester. It does not exist in their mind. They're there to keep you, shoot you with beanbags, whatever it needs to take to show the presence of protecting and serving, because they're protecting and serving. Their protection and service is not for you. Their protection and service are for those who put them in the places that they need to be, and they meet up with and continue doing what they do on their level. So,
and I think that for some officers that can be the case, but I think that there are also officers that they get into the job, you know, dealing with the new officers. I think the new officers, you know, like how we talk about new generation. When I'm talking to the new officers, I keep telling them, you know, you are the game changers. You are the ones that are going to either change the route in which law enforcement and community have been going, or you're going to stick with it and become corrupted by it.
Right.
And so I really try to put an emphasis, because one of the things that they tell us on the tours and trainings we do is why they became an officer, and nobody ever says I became an officer to kill people.
Right.
They say I became an officer because somebody in my life was an officer, changed my life, or my family, generational history, and things like that. So nobody says this is what happens. I think that fear, it develops, and I look at, so when I look at officer Di Martin here in southeastern San Diego.
And
Officer Di Martin, yes, you got him, thank you. Officer Di Martin and Officer Rosas were in this community and are still in this community, and we have formal complaints that have been levied against them. They've been here 3 years, Officer Rosas, 8 years, Officer Di Martin, and the excessive force, falsifying report, the way in which they communicate with us, they are one situation away from killing somebody.
Right, and if you've been around for 8 years, you should know better.
Well, you've been sanctioned.
Right.
Your behavior, if you have this pattern of behavior and nobody's been complaining until now, then your department, to me, has sanctioned your behavior as acceptable. And so he was a field training officer. He was, come on now.
Yeah.
So when we have officers like this, this is the issue.
Yeah.
If they really are about community-oriented policing, as we hear the chief and everybody else, every law enforcement department now has jumped on the bandwagon of community-oriented policing. And all I'm saying is where is it? Where is it?
The mentality has to change prior to that to actually occur and happen.
They definitely have to, and it has to change with the folks that they know that are doing the damage, because there are officers that are being officers, that are treating us as they were supposed to.
Let me start off with the civil deliverance, which is the final chapter of our program today, and I think that will touch on the highest level of where this mentality comes from. We'll start with the Fraternal Order of Police and their view on militarization. So the Fraternal Order of Police has spoken out in favor of equipping law enforcement officers with military equipment on the grounds that it increases the officer's safety and enables them to protect members of the public and other first responders, firefighters, and emergency medical service personnel. However, in 2017, studies showed that police forces which received military equipment were more likely to have violent encounters with the public, regardless of the local crime rates. That element of militarizing police has shown to escalate and actually bring to life whatever hallucinations they have that make them fearful to the point that they need that kind of equipment and militarized presence. Sustaining the law, the purpose of law enforcement is one thing. Thinking it's ready to self-mutate into something it was never given authorization to do by a people is another. The criminal element exists in society. Terrorist networks exist in society. Criminal enterprises exist in society. That's a fact. So is the understanding that the percentage of innocent law-abiding citizens are without a doubt greater than those who engage in unlawful practices and the criminal element of our societies. The new image of justice is the image of intimidation. The idea that no nonsense towards a particular demographic is solving the problem, when the true problem is you can solve criminal cases, but you can never solve the criminal aspect of humanity. As long as we desire justice and order through law, it will exist. And it will continue to as long as we exist in our natural state, blind, playing the game of owning that which can't be owned by a human soul in this existence. That is where I'm coming from on that. And I would also like to finish by saying we need to organize and mobilize. That is actually the anthem that we have, because if you cannot organize and you cannot mobilize, then you cannot understand the fundamentals of actually being able to amend legislations, which is the ultimate goal. To amend legislations, create legislations directly to the constructive countering of problematic standing legislations by the means of amending and countering legislations. Ladies and gentlemen, today has been a wonderful show, and I would like to cut the civil deliverance short so that everyone can have time to sign out appropriately. I would like to give you that opportunity. So let's go around the table, starting with Mrs. Tasha Williamson, who's been a wonderful guest, and I hope to have her back on sometime in the near future.
Yes.
I just want to thank you guys for the opportunity. I really enjoyed it. I hope to be coming back really soon. And again, there's people who make bad choices, and that happens in law enforcement as well. What I think we want is we want law enforcement to treat us with respect and to remember that they are also part of humanity.
Yes.
And that we want them to be used to protect and not to harm. So.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Ms. Williams. And Art?
Yeah, JFK once said, "Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable." So that's all I got to say.
Strong ending point, Art. You always make that historical anchor drop. Miss Wildcat.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity for us to hash out physical statistics of the militarization, what we're facing right now, what the historical, what the the history behind it, how it started. It's not balanced. The conversation about constantly having good police officers, I don't want to change the conversation to remove the bad officers, because as long as they're there, as long as there are laws that throw poor people under the bus, there needs to be change, and we have to still talk about it.
Definitely.
Make that vote count.
Make it count. Make it count. Mobilize and organize, ladies and gentlemen. Mobilize and organize. Thank you very much for joining us for our 5th episode, Law Enforcement Militarization. We'll be back on next weekend with what topic, Art?
I'll have to look at my notes again.
I think it's police, sexual assault, domestic violence, misconduct.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Very close to me, and hope you can join us.
All right. Thank you very much. We are the Maya Quorum B1.
Be luminous.
Be luminous B1. I forgot my own motto.
I was like,
it was a heck of a show.
Okay.
When you take this long journey, in your mind.
Okay, so good news, that went all the way through. Bad news, my phone died halfway in. I'm streaming still right now. I don't know how much
Which one is the YouTube?
The YouTube is this one, Facebook is this one.
Okay.
But it looks a lot smoother than what it was. It just had like a lot of.
I'll go ahead and do this.
But this is the reason why we have backup.
If I need to, I can rip the footage.
And then
Totally.
you put it to my Facebook.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.